My former fiancée sought a temporary hiatus from our engagement, intending to re-explore a connection with her previously unfaithful paramour. My response was immediate and unyielding. I liquidated my property, executed a cross-continental relocation, and instituted a policy of absolute non-communication. A mere 8 months hence, her life has, by all accounts, completely unraveled. I was 32 years old, with an existence that, for all intents and purposes, was secure and diligently adhering to a carefully plotted trajectory. The central figure in this chronicle, besides myself, is my now ex-betrothed, Sarah, who was then 30. Our association had flourished over a 4-year period, culminating in an engagement that lasted the final 12 months. We shared a domicile that I had acquired before our formal pledge. The property was held exclusively in my name, a fiscal determination rooted in my pre-existing assets and a familial endowment received long before Sarah became a significant fixture in my life. Sarah had taken up residence with me roughly 2 years into our relationship. The other key individual is Sarah's former beau, James, whose prior liaison with her, as she had recounted, had been dissolved due to his serial disloyalty. Her parents and her younger sibling, Clara, also became privy to the escalating circumstances. The foundation and the first cracks. Our initial context, I had believed, was exceptionally robust. We were introduced through a shared connection, courted for a year before cohabitation, and 2 more years passed until I offered my proposal. The relationship appeared to be anchored in compatible pursuits and what I perceived as reciprocal deference. Sarah was fully cognizant of my sound fiscal standing. The house, for instance, had been purchased using a combination of personal savings and an inheritance from my paternal grandparents. It was a 3-bedroom suburban residence, perfectly commodious and more than sufficient for both our current necessities and our prospective schemes, which encompassed matrimony and the potential commencement of a family in a few years' time. Sarah did contribute to the operational expenditures of the household, such as essential services and provisions, but possessed zero proprietary equity in the real estate itself. This was a clear, long-established, and uncontested arrangement. James, her ex-partner, was a known entity from her historical narrative. She had been transparent about their 2-year entanglement, which had ended acrimoniously when she discovered his consistent infidelity. She had articulated on numerous occasions the profound distress and sense of betrayal he had inflicted. I considered this ancient history, something she had fully reconciled and moved beyond, particularly given our solemn engagement and joint life. Approximately 6 months before the pivotal incident, I began to discern subtle alterations in Sarah's demeanor and discourse. James's appellation, previously uttered sparingly and only in connection with prior distress, commenced appearing more frequently, albeit within seemingly casual frameworks. She might mention having stumbled upon a digital media post from him or hearing news through a distant, shared acquaintance. Initially, I did not attribute much import to this. Figures from one's past sometimes drift back into one's sphere of consciousness. However, these mentions became more habitual. She started to muse about hypothetical scenarios related to her past, sometimes juxtaposing her life decisions. I noted a growing sense of internal agitation in her that I found difficult to isolate. She became somewhat more reserved, devoting extended periods to her mobile device, frequently appearing pensive or preoccupied after these sessions. When I would inquire if everything was satisfactory, she would typically offer an ambiguous palliation or ascribe her melancholy to professional pressures or sheer exhaustion. The inevitable crisis. The situation escalated roughly 3 months prior to her request for a separation, when she informed me that James had directly reached out to her. According to Sarah, he had initiated contact with a contrite acknowledgement of his previous misconduct, articulating deep remorse and asserting a substantial personal metamorphosis. She claimed to be surprised by the outreach but also intrigued. She portrayed it as a necessity for final resolution, a need to simply lend an ear to his account. I recalled suggesting that closure is often a state one achieves internally rather than seeking it from the source of one's pain, but I refrained from issuing any interdiction against her communicating with him. I believe that in a relationship premised on trust, dictating who one can or cannot converse with was not my prerogative. Nevertheless, I did express my profound unease given their fraught history. Over the ensuing weeks, it became transparent that their communication was not a one-off event. Sarah would be engaging in electronic messaging late into the night, occasionally withdrawing from the shared space to field incoming calls. When I addressed this pattern, she admitted they had been speaking more habitually. She characterized James as being highly compelling, crafting an image of a completely rehabilitated man who deeply regretted his past actions. She began to allude to shared experiences, trips they had taken, old inside jokes. It was as if she was reassessing her former entanglement with him, viewing it not as a source of suffering, but through a fresh, sentimental perspective. The clear turning point, signaling a serious problem, was when she commenced making explicit parallels between James and myself, or, more accurately, between her relationship with James and her relationship with me. She started to articulate a feeling of having been deprived of a specific type of zest or fervor, which she subtly associated with her time alongside James. She would utter phrases like, "Our existence was agreeable and predictable," but then follow it with musing about whether placidity and permanence were long-term sufficiency for her. This was alarming, as these were qualities we had supposedly both valued. I endeavored to discuss these concerns with her directly, asking her what had fundamentally altered and what she felt was deficient in our partnership. Her responses were often contradictory. She would declare her love and her appreciation for our life, but then immediately express doubts about her own emotions and future felicity, frequently referencing James and the what-if scenarios. It became apparent she was profoundly ambivalent or perhaps was being magnetically pulled into a habitual pattern. The week before she requested the separation, she attended a casual meeting for coffee with James. She notified me beforehand, framing it as an innocent encounter to finally achieve that elusive closure. I did not dispute this, but I stated unequivocally that I was uncomfortable with it, particularly given her recent conduct and expressions of doubt. She proceeded nonetheless. Upon her return, she was distant and evasive, providing minimal details about their dialogue, only saying it was interesting and that James had indeed matured considerably. The ambience in our residence became tense for the ensuing days. The decisive confrontation and the fallout. The dialogue that fundamentally reshaped our reality occurred on a Saturday morning. I had intended for us to spend the day together, attempting to re-establish our bond. Before these plans could materialize, in the very room where we had mapped out our wedding and our future, she began by expressing her gratitude for me and the life we had cultivated. She then transitioned into her internal conflict, stating she was in a state of emotional bewilderment regarding her sentiments. She reintroduced James, saying that reconnecting with him had stirred up old emotions and made her question whether she had made an error in leaving him, or rather whether she should explore if any embers of affection still smoldered, now that he claimed to be a reformed person. Then came the proposition. She solicited a temporary halt to our relationship. She was specific. She wanted a period of time, a few weeks, perhaps a month or two, to investigate her connection with James. She suggested she could stay with her sister Clara or secure a provisional dwelling. During this interlude, she wanted to engage in a courtship with James to determine the veracity of her feelings versus mere wistful remembrance. She emphasized that she did not definitively wish to end things with me, but that she required this latitude and space to decipher her heart before our wedding. She even suggested that this exploration would ultimately render her a better companion for me or confirm that James was truly a mistake, thus strengthening our partnership in the long run. She solicited my forbearance and restraint. I absorbed her proposition without interruption. Internally, what I registered was a request from my fiancée to suspend our engagement and our shared life so she could test drive a relationship with an unfaithful ex-boyfriend. The finality of her request, from my vantage point, was instantaneous. While she was framing it as a temporary pause for investigation, I interpreted it as a fundamental breach of the commitment our engagement signified. When she concluded, I did not engage in a lengthy debate or plea. I asked a few clarifying questions to ensure I grasped the parameters of her request, that she intended to actively pursue a romantic and likely physical relationship with James during this hiatus. She confirmed this was her intention, stating it was the only way to truly know. My immediate response was calm and concise. I informed her that if she felt the necessity to investigate a relationship with another man, then our partnership was, for all practical purposes, over. I stated unequivocally that I would not serve as a mere contingency, nor would I consent to a framework where our solemn pledge was suspended for her external endeavors. I articulated that I would not be waiting for her to make a decision between me and her untrustworthy ex. I explained that her request itself demonstrated a profound lack of respect for me and for the vows we were planning to take. I told her that I considered our engagement and relationship terminated, rendered defunct, commencing without delay. She appeared visibly discomfited, perhaps anticipating a protracted discussion or fervent supplication from my side. She attempted to backtrack, suggesting maybe a separation wasn't necessary or that we could discuss it further, but the proposition had been made, and the underlying sentiment was transparent to me. I reiterated my stance. Her desire to explore a relationship with another man was in itself the conclusive end of ours. Sarah was manifestly shocked by my position. I told her that the trust and commitment I believed we had were fundamentally and irreversibly shattered by her proposal. I stated that since she required latitude to investigate things with James, I would ensure she had all the space she needed. I informed her she needed to make arrangements to remove her personal effects from the domicile. I suggested she should proceed with her plan to stay with her sister or secure that alternative dwelling, as she would no longer be residing with me. That same Saturday afternoon, after she departed the residence in a state of distress to presumably process things or go to her sister's, I began to take decisive action. My determination was not driven by raw emotion but with a cold clarity. The association was concluded. The future we had mapped out was nullified. Therefore, the logical subsequent moves were to disassemble the infrastructure of that shared existence. My initial action was to engage the services of a professional to change the door mechanisms. Within a few hours, all the locks on the property were replaced. I held the title, it was my exclusive property. She had zero legal claim to it. My second action, executed over the remainder of the weekend, was to prepare the house for liquidation. This involved systematically gathering some of Sarah's more readily portable personal effects that were intermingled with mine in common areas, clothing, toiletries, a few decorative items. I neatly contained these in boxes and stored them in the garage, intending to arrange for their collection. I also began decluttering and depersonalizing the space to enhance its appeal to potential buyers. I contacted a highly regarded real estate agent on Monday morning. I briefly elucidated the situation. I was newly single, needed to transfer the property swiftly due to a forthcoming professional opportunity one would be pursuing, a statement that was prospectively accurate, as I immediately began activating my professional network for out-of-state roles, and desired a fast, uncomplicated sale. The agent was efficient and listed the property within a few days. The market conditions were favorable for sellers. Concurrently, I initiated a search for new employment in a distant jurisdiction. I had been passively contemplating a career move for some months prior, desiring new challenges. This situation provided the immediate impetus. I updated my curriculum vitae, reached out to contacts, and applied for several positions in a city on the opposite coast that offered a strong industrial base and a complete change of environment. The shared digital storage cloud we utilized for photos, some documents, and backups was another point of focus. It contained years of our joint recollections. I downloaded my own files and photos, anything that was mine exclusively or that I had a right to. Then I systematically deleted her access and subsequently erased the shared folders and content that was predominantly ours. It was a digital severing. I communicated with Sarah minimally. When she contacted me demanding to know why the locks were changed, I informed her via text message that our relationship was terminated, the house was being liquidated, and she needed to arrange a time with my realtor or a designated acquaintance of mine to collect her boxed belongings. I did not engage in further discussion or disputes. I stated that all necessary communication would henceforth be purely logistical. She was, as expected, livid and emotionally shattered. She accused me of being callous and rash. She insisted she had only been confused and that my actions were an overreaction. I refused to debate this with her. My determination was final. The house, due to its prime location and excellent condition and an aggressive valuation methodology, received an offer within 2 weeks. It was an all-cash offer, slightly below the asking price, but with no contingencies, which I accepted. The final transaction was scheduled for 30 days later. During this period, Sarah's attempts to connect with me escalated, involving calls, texts, and emails. I refrained from responding to most of them. When her messages became abusive or excessively emotional, I blocked her number and email address. I also removed her access from all social media platforms. I instructed my realtor to handle all communication regarding her belongings, which she eventually collected with her sister Clara present. I ensured my absence during the retrieval of her possessions. The liquidation of the house concluded as scheduled, approximately 6 weeks after Sarah's proposition for a separation. By that time, I had already finalized a favorable professional appointment in the new jurisdiction. The offer included a substantial aid for moving expenses, which expedited my relocation. I disposed of some of my furnishings, placed essentials into storage, and packed my automobile. I executed the cross-continental move. The process was swift. I secured a provisional apartment in the new municipality, commenced my new role, and began the establishment of a new life. I focused on my vocation, exploring the new urban area, and re-establishing contact with a couple of old university friends who lived nearby. I made a conscious endeavor not to dwell on the past relationship beyond the lessons learned about clear boundaries and deal breakers. The aftermath and her downfall. It has now been approximately 8 months since my relocation. I am settled in my new role, which is both challenging and rewarding. I secured a more permanent dwelling. I am, for all intents and purposes, faring well. I would not say I am ecstatic or empowered by the events, but I am functional, stable, and progressing with my life as planned, albeit on a revised trajectory. The reason for this discourse, this venting or rambling, is due to the information that has been filtering back to me about Sarah's current predicament. This intelligence has come primarily through 2 channels, Clara, Sarah's sister, who initiated contact a couple of months ago, and indirectly through mutual acquaintances from my old city with whom I still have very loose professional ties. According to Clara and corroborated by other snippets of information, Sarah's investigation with James was short-lived and calamitous. James, consistent with his former patterns of behavior, was apparently not the reformed character he portrayed. He was allegedly still entangled with other women or swiftly returned to his prior lifestyle once Sarah was available to him. He terminated things with Sarah without warning, roughly 8 weeks following her request for separation from me. Clara mentioned he told Sarah he wasn't prepared for anything serious and that he found her mercurial emotional state and excessive expectations overwhelming. Following this, Sarah found herself in a precarious position. She had forfeited her secure partnership with me. The house we lived in was liquidated. She had been residing temporarily with Clara, but that arrangement became tense owing to Sarah's volatile feelings and, according to Clara, her refusal to accept culpability for her choices, often assigning blame to me for overreacting or to James for deceiving her yet again. Sarah's parents also became involved. Clara informed me that her parents were profoundly disheartened by Sarah's actions. They had apparently held me in high regard and were anticipating the wedding. They had been aware of James's unsuitability from Sarah's previous association with him. When they learned the full sequence of events, that Sarah had solicited a break to be with James, that I had consequently terminated the engagement and disposed of my property, they aligned themselves with my stance. They felt Sarah had squandered a promising future due to recklessness and a lack of sound judgment. They expressed their disapproval to Sarah directly. The next piece of intelligence I received was that Sarah was dismissed from her employment. The particulars are somewhat vague, but it seems the profound internal distress and lack of equilibrium in her private life impaired her productivity and presence at the workplace. So, she was jobless. With James having abandoned her, her relationship with her sister strained, her parents disapproving of her actions, and now unemployed, Sarah was and apparently still is virtually without a fixed abode, subsisting on temporary benevolence from friends, as Clara eventually asked her to secure alternative accommodation. Clara's initial contact with me was, she stated, to offer an apology for Sarah's behavior and to articulate her and her parents' regret for how things transpired. She also wished to ensure I was aware that they did not condone Sarah's choices. It was a surprising conversation, and I primarily listened. Recently, the phase of fervent entreaties has commenced. Sarah has been attempting to reach me through various novel channels, creating new digital media profiles to transmit messages or trying to call from unknown numbers. The missives that have successfully reached me before I block the new avenue are apologies, pleas for a second opportunity, requests for assistance, sometimes fiscal, sometimes just wanting to talk. She has mentioned her difficult situation, her regret, and her supposed realization of the error she made. I am not soliciting advice on whether I should reconsider our relationship or offer aid. That avenue is sealed, permanently fused, and the very structure housing it has been razed to the ground. My actions were decisive, and I maintain them. I suppose the rationale for transcribing all this on Reddit like this is to simply lay out the sequence of events and mostly to express my pent-up feelings. I am not seeking counsel on how to interact with her. I adhere to a clear policy of absolute non-communication. Update 1, the swift execution. Approximately 3 weeks have elapsed since my original submission. I have perused the numerous comments and private messages. I appreciate the various perspectives and the time individuals devoted to reading the extensive account. 1. Proprietary concerns and departure. As stated, the domicile was 100% my property. Sarah's name was on no documents related to ownership. Her contributions granted no equity or tenancy rights beyond that of a partner residing in my home. When our engagement and partnership ended due to her stated intention to pursue another male, her basis for cohabitation was nullified. She was asked to vacate after she effectively terminated the foundation of our shared life. The lock mechanisms were switched to safeguard my asset during the liquidation process and after the definitive cessation of our relationship. 2. The immediacy of the resolution. Her request was specifically for space to explore a relationship with James. She explicitly stated her intent to date and sleep with him. This was not a point of ambiguity for me. I was not interested in being an option or a fallback plan. 3. Familial alignment. Sarah's parents were informed by Clara and later by Sarah herself. Their alignment with my position was based on several factors. They viewed me as a stable, reliable partner and were aware of James's past betrayals. They did not perceive my actions, ending the partnership, disposing of my property, as the source of the problem, but rather as a direct consequence of Sarah's initial decision. 4. Efficiency of action. I am a planner by nature. Once a resolution is made, I tend to execute it efficiently. The job search was an acceleration of pre-existing thoughts. The housing market was highly active. I valued speed and certainty over maximizing every last cent. The goal was a clean and rapid severance from the former life. In the weeks since my original post, Sarah's attempts to connect continued, then tapered off slightly after a particularly direct message I authorized a former colleague to relay to her. I empowered this person to tell Sarah unequivocally that there was no possibility of reconciliation, no chance for discussion, and that any further attempts would be regarded as harassment. I have continued to maintain no direct contact. I ascertained a few more details through Clara. James, after abandoning Sarah, apparently made it very clear to their mutual acquaintances that Sarah had been too intense and was dwelling excessively on the past. This, Clara said, further humiliated Sarah. Sarah's job situation did not improve. The most significant news from Clara was that Sarah had for a brief period attempted to stay with her parents. However, this arrangement also failed as Sarah reacted poorly to their firm stance that she needed to acknowledge her mistakes and take concrete steps to rebuild her life independently. Clara did not know Sarah's precise whereabouts when she last spoke to me, only that she was temporarily residing with an old university friend and was still struggling significantly. Update 2, the final drawing of the line. It has now been approximately 6 months since my initial addendum, making it around 7 months since my original narrative. A significant span of time has passed, allowing for further developments, or the lack thereof, in Sarah's situation, and for my own existence to further stabilize and progress in the new jurisdiction. My own situation remains favorable and predictable. I am content with my current phase of life, focusing on professional growth and personal interests. I do not dwell on Sarah or the former partnership. Regarding Sarah, the inflow of intelligence has thankfully significantly diminished. Clara has respected my implicit request to cease updates. However, one piece of significant information did reach me indirectly about 2 months ago. The intelligence came via a former colleague from my old city. He hesitantly shared something he thought I might want to be aware of. He informed me that Sarah had, at some point in the preceding months, departed the state. Apparently, after exhausting options with friends and with her family maintaining their principled stance, she resolved to relocate, possibly to live with a distant relative or to attempt a completely fresh start where no one knew her or her recent history. This news of her relocating did not elicit any strong reaction in me. It seemed like a logical, if perhaps desperate, step for someone in her unenviable position. There have been no further attempts by Sarah to connect with me. My change of number and diligent blocking of any suspicious new account seems to have been effective. My life has continued to move in a direction I've set. The liquidation of the property, the relocation, the new role, these were all resolutions made to forge a clean break and a new foundation, and those objectives have been fulfilled. This will likely be my final update on this matter, as there is little more to convey from my perspective, and the stream of information concerning Sarah has essentially dried up, which is my preference. The aim of my original post was to document a sequence of events and actions, and that has been accomplished.